Chapter 179, The Sun's Carriage. Giant and the Dragon Carriage. Xu Qing fell into deep thought. He recalled that after he returned from the sea, he had made a trip to the sea records library and reported this matter. He had left the sect after that and went to the Red Plains. Now that he had returned not long ago, it was both reasonable and unreasonable for the other party to come and ask him about this. What was reasonable was the time, but what was unreasonable was that the other party actually wanted to summon him and ask him personally. If all of this was true, Xu Qing could already judge that the matter of the giant and the dragon carriage was probably very important. That was why it attracted Elder Zhao's attention. Xu Qing knew that he couldn't refuse this matter. He nodded silently and put away his magic boat. When he looked up at Deacon Li had a spurious smile on his face as he spoke. I suggest that you don't make the elder wait too long. Besides, I also came from the foot of the mountain. I don't believe that someone with your cultivation level wouldn't have prepared a flight talisman. So, do you want me to bring you or do you want to move by yourself? Deacon Li looked at Xu Qing. Xu Qing nodded and stuck a flight talisman on his leg. With a step, he directly arrived in the air. Deacon Li transformed into a rainbow and headed straight for the 7th peak. Xu Qing followed behind. As they got closer and closer to the 7th peak, Xu Qing sighed with emotion. This was his second time here. The first time was when he entered the sect. He still remembered what the round-faced cultivator had said. This might be your only time going up the mountain. Now that he thought about it, it was correct. After all, not everyone had the hope of reaching the foundation building realm. Even he had to consider the foundation building resources. As he pondered, Xu Qing did not lower his vigilance. He couldn't completely trust the other party's words, but he had no other choice now. Just like that, the 7th peak gradually became clearer in Xu Qing's eyes. Most of the mountain was covered in green plants, and one could see a mountain path winding from the foot of the mountain to the top of the mountain. This mountain path had many forks that were connected to palace-like buildings. At the same time, there were plazas and cave abodes in many places on the mountain. The two of them quickly flew into the mountain and passed by many large halls. They also passed by the place where Xu Qing had obtained the Daoist rope and magic boat back then. Finally, in the area near the top of the mountain, a magnificent large hall was reflected in Xu Qing's eyes. This hall was even more imposing than what he had seen on the way. It was built with greenish-white spirit tiles. At the same time, there were statues of strange beasts stuck on each corner as though they were about to soar into the sky. In front of the hall, there were two huge human-shaped stone statues standing there like giants, emitting waves of pressure. The door of the hall wasn't closed, but for some reason, the interior couldn't be seen at all. It was a blur. Deacon Li's body landed, and Xu Qing also landed on the ground. An intense sense of danger invaded his body at this moment. The invisible array fluctuations from the surroundings seemed to be able to instantly destroy him. What was even more terrifying was something in the hall. It was as though an astonishing ferocious beast was entrenched in this hall. The aura it exhaled transformed into a storm that shook the soul. As it spread in all directions, Deacon Li respectfully lowered his head and spoke. Elder, I have brought Xu Qing. Come in. A hoarse and aged voice rang out from the hall. When it landed in Xu Qing's ears, it felt like it had transformed into rumbling thunder, causing Xu Qing's breathing to be hurried. He felt a tremendous pressure descend upon him. He barely managed to steady himself. After lowering his head and bowing, he lifted his feet with difficulty and walked forward step by step. With each step he took, sweat broke out on his forehead. The astonishing pressure coming from the hall caused his mind to rumble the closer he got. The trembling from all the flesh and blood in his body made it difficult for Xu Qing to walk. However, it seemed that the existence in the hall didn't have any obvious malice. This pressure seemed to be instinctively released. Hence, although it was difficult for Xu Qing, he was still able to rely on his body refinement, attainment, and cultivation to walk in step by step. The instant he stepped through the threshold of the hall, he finally understood why everything he saw from the outside was a blur. It was because everything in the hall was distorted, regardless of whether it was the furniture or the stone pillars. Even the surrounding walls were shaking and twisting endlessly in Xu Qing's eyes. The source of all this was the figure of an old man sitting on the large chair at the front. His face couldn't be seen clearly, only his purple Daoist robe and white hair could be seen. His body seemed to emit an invisible force that caused the area enveloped to be unable to be seen clearly. "Greetings, Elder." Xu Qing endured the dizziness caused by the distortion on the ground and bowed with cupped fists. "Tell me in detail about the golden crow dragon carriage you saw." The ancient voice calmly rang out and sank into Xu Qing's mind, echoing for a while. Xu Qing took a deep breath. There was nothing to hide about this matter. It was originally a chance encounter, so he chose to report it previously. Hence, after the elder spoke, he told him everything. Elder Zhao didn't say a word and only listened quietly. After Xu Qing finished speaking, the hall fell silent. Xu Qing silently endured the immense pressure. After a long time, Elder Zhao's voice slowly rang out without the slightest fluctuation of emotions. "You missed an opportunity." Xu Qing remained silent. "But you also managed to survive." Xu Qing hesitated for a moment. He endured the pressure and dizziness and cupped his fists. "Elder, may I ask what that dragon carriage is?" The hall was silent. After a long time, the aged voice rang out again. "Since you've seen it with your own eyes, there's no harm in telling you. That's the sun's carriage." When Xu Qing heard this, his heart trembled violently. "There's a secret art engraved on the inner wall of the bronze dragon carriage. It's called the Golden Crow Refines All Life. This secret art is one of the emperor-level secret arts, which were rare even in ancient times. Very few people can encounter the sun's carriage, and even fewer people have the opportunity to see this secret art. Those who can learn it after seeing it are extremely rare." There was a hint of emotion in the old voice as he said this. Secret art, the giant and the dragon carriage he had seen back then appeared in Xu Qing's mind. "That's why I said that you missed an opportunity. Your luck is poor. For so many years, only the Lord of the Seven Sex Alliance of my Seven Blood Eyes had such an opportunity when he was young. He stayed in the dragon carriage for a breath of time and learned a fragment of the art. After that, the dragon carriage sank to the bottom of the sea. It has been 100 years since then. Now that it has reappeared, it's obvious that it's searching for someone fated. When the secret art in the dragon carriage is comprehended again, it will sink to the bottom of the sea and sleep again." Xu Qing's thoughts fluctuated. These things had an extremely great impact on him. Presumably, they were also secrets. It was impossible for a Piedmont disciple like him to know. "I told you this because this matter can be recorded in the Sea Records Library and it's difficult to exchange it for spirit stones. Therefore, it can be considered compensation to you. Also, seeing that your cultivation base is about to break through, and the 7th Peak's grand competition will begin soon, try to do your best." As the aged voice echoed, a huge force swept over from all directions. Xu Qing's body retreated uncontrollably until he was outside the hall. Everything in the hall became blurry again. Looking at the hall, Xu Qing cupped his fists and bowed. At this moment, there was already a lot of sweat on his body. In the short period of time in the hall, the pressure he endured was extremely great. Elder Zhao, who was sitting in the chair, made him feel that he was much more terrifying and powerful than the ferocious beasts in the Forbidden Zone he had seen before. Deacon Li was still waiting outside the hall. When he saw Xu Qing coming out, he said with a smile, "Xu Qing, I'll send you off." As he spoke, his body flew up. Xu Qing took a deep breath and followed behind. The mountain breeze blew over and dried the sweat on his body. However, the terrifying feeling in his heart about Elder Zhao's strength couldn't be blown away by the wind. Elder Zhao isn't an ordinary elder. Deacon Li, who was at the front, glanced at Xu Qing and slowly spoke. "In the 7th Peak, among the 13 elders, Elder Zhao is ranked 3rd. Also, I heard Jianeng talking about you." In the elder's words, although the kid is stupid, he is not a bad character. Outside the 7th Peak, Deacon Li said this meaningfully and left. Xu Qing looked at the other parties back and fell silent for a moment before entering the city. He was very clear about the meaning of the other party's last sentence. This was a warning to him not to secretly kill Zhao Jianeng because of some small conflicts. Xu Qing didn't have such thoughts for now. Zhao Jianeng has a good grandfather. Also, is the competition going to start soon? Xu Qing walked through the city with a calm expression, slowly calming the emotions caused by Elder Zhao's pressure. He thought of the array crossbow he had obtained from the Diamond Sex ancestor, and changed his direction, walking toward the transportation department. He was prepared to strengthen his magic boat a little before the competition. It was noon and there were many pedestrians in the city. Amidst the coldness and people rushing about, Xu Qing passed by a fruit stall. There were some large apples today, which were not easy to come by. After Xu Qing saw them, he bought them all and placed them in his pouch before walking into the port area. While walking toward the transportation department, he passed by an alley. Xu Qing seemed to have sensed something and suddenly turned his head to look over. A cold glint appeared in his eyes. As his gaze landed, the shadow of a youth was revealed in the darkness of the alley. This youth wore a gray Taoist robe that was bulging. He also wore a dogskin coat inside. His small face was dirty. He was none other than the mute youth from the homicide department. He seemed to have been waiting for a long time. When he saw Xu Qing, he immediately dragged a corpse over. After placing it in front of Xu Qing, his stiff face forced out a fawning expression. After that, he quickly ran away without even looking back. Xu Qing frowned and looked at the corpse in front of him. This was a wanted criminal. His corpse was covered in bite marks. Other than his intact head, his entire body was badly mangled, as though he had been bitten to death by a wild beast.